Well, welcome back to another episode of the Always About People show. I'm your host, Chris Allen, and I am so excited about this conversation today. I can barely take it. I brought my Mr. Sketch markers. I've got all my stuff necessary to take notes, and I'm glad that you're joining with us. If you're watching this after the fact, I hope that this conversation will be helpful because it's a passion of mine. Obviously, on this show, we talk about all things people. Culture, how it affects people, motivation, performance, all the things that are currently being talked about in the workplace, I think are really interesting. In previous episodes, we've talked about the Great Resignation. We've talked about the needs of people, the motivations of people, and how to improve their performance. We've talked about really how we can engage people to a greater extent. Today, we're continuing that conversation, and I'm excited about our guest. David Saviola is a friend, and he is the money pastor. But he's so much more than that. He has an incredible view on the workplace and on people, how to engage people, how to meet their needs. And so we're having a conversation about holistic wellness. How do we understand the needs of people? How do we meet the needs of people? How do we meet those needs in a creative way? And I know that many of the conversations that I'm having with business owners today are really about how can we engage people more? How do we motivate people? What's this next generation looking for? What kinds of things can we do inside of our culture to really attract and retain people? And so we're going to have that conversation today. We're going to go back and forth. We're streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. And so we would love it if you would send in your comments. You can even just say hello. But send in your comments, send in your questions. We'll get to them as they come. And would you please help me welcome David Saviola to the show? David.
Hey, Chris.
Great to have you.
Thanks. Super glad to be here.
Yeah. So all the way from Florida, what's the temperature there?
70-ish.
Not bad.
Not bad. A little chilly.
That's great. Well, it's so good to have you on the show. It's an honor. I mean, we've gotten to know each other over the past few years, and I would love it if you just take a few seconds to tell the audience who you are, what you're passionate about, what you think about, anything you want to add to the conversation, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, awesome. I'm passionate about people, which is probably why we're here together, because that's a passion of both of ours. Let's just get the elephant in the room maybe out of the way, or right off the bat, because people ask all the time, what is a money pastor? So since it's on the screen, we better address that super quick. It's really not that complicated. And I'll just say, regardless of anybody's personal beliefs or their faith beliefs, every truth about money is in the Bible. If you apply what the Bible says about money, again, regardless of where you're at in your faith, you're gonna come out really good. And so all a money pastor really does is we help people apply those truths to their personal money story. And that's it. That's actually how we got so engaged with people. That's how we got so engaged with businesses and employees, mostly down here in the Panhandle of Florida, but over the last, 13, 15 years in the whole Southeast here.
Yeah. And so obviously the money pastor, pastoring people, particularly around money. Let's, why don't you tell everybody else also kind of what you're working on the side? And because I think that will lead us into a deeper conversation about employee engagement.
Yeah. So about 7 years ago, just out of, working with, more and more businesses, one of the things, that we recognized was these people really had a heart for their team, for their workforce. But, maybe as we'll talk about a little bit later, there really hasn't been any innovation in almost a half a century, real significant innovation in the space of what do we give employees, which is probably one of the reasons we're seeing these disconnects that, all this data and research you talk about so frequently has been out there. But so in working with these businesses, honestly, it was just an answer to prayer, because we just said, God, why are you showing us this, and how do we plug in? And he dropped what we call what we call forward financial wellness program into our lap. was kind of funny because 7 or 8 years ago, I Googled financial wellness. I wasn't really sure what that meant exactly. And at the time, it was just a couple white papers, some research came up, and a Wikipedia definition, and that was about it. Now, almost every big insurance carrier or wirehouse has their own program. Dave Ramsey's got a program. So there's this plethora that sort of hit the market the last few years. But for us, what it is, I think this is actually one of the reasons you and I first connected, was it starts with asking employees what they value, what's important to them, and how they perceive their own situation. In our case, mostly financial, but it's gone way beyond money at this point. So fast forward 7, 8 years, now it's a full-blown app, with a team of coaches and all kind of other things that sew into people. So we're super excited about the next season for that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get deeper into that, but let's pull back out for a second and let's have a conversation about what's going on in the workplace, because everyone's talking about the Great Resignation. People are talking about the increasing quit rates. People are talking about a lack of engagement in the workplace. Gallup has identified that only 1/3 of people are engaged in the workplace. The McKinsey organization has come out with a recent study saying what is most important to people is that they feel valued by their organization, valued by their direct manager, and they feel a sense of belonging and purpose. So we've got an issue in the workplace. What are you seeing?
Yeah, seeing all that, and we've been seeing it for a while. I think that, right, like you've brought to our attention and encouraged all of us, this isn't new, although we think because of whatever's going on, that's been manifested. But I see a couple of things. One, and we can unpack this. You and I talked about this briefly the other day, but one of the things I'm seeing is a little bit of business owner hurt. I'm not really sure how to describe it yet. This is kind of new, or business owner, I don't mean to demean PTSD, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. And in other words, the owners that a lot of them I've been meeting with, they're a little tired. They're a little worn out from the last 18 to 24 months. They've experienced things that they haven't really experienced maybe in 20 or 30 years of being in business. And they're not, I'm not saying it's not bitterness or they're not vindictive. They're hurt. They're emotionally hurt. That's the only way I can describe it. And I think we need to meet them there and really just kind of encourage them to get over that point and say, hey, okay, well, looking forward, instead of dwelling, first of all, this isn't a new problem. This isn't a problem unique to your business that you just created, in the last year. This has been going on for a while and it's widespread. So let's focus more on the future and what can we do differently?
Yeah.
Let's talk about doing something different going forward, instead of kind of doing the same thing we've always done and try to expect a different result.
Yep. That is the definition of insanity, isn't it?
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. So let's go back to that for a second, because I want your thoughts on where this hurt is coming from. Why do you think business owners, leaders are hurt?
That's a great question. I have the gift of encouragement, and I tend to be super optimistic. So where I think it comes from is, again, these people, they actually care for their employees and their team at a different level. Most of them consider them family, even though I think a lot of employees would go, what are you talking about? But behind the scenes. And so I think you just if you had family members that were struggling themselves or weren't finding value or purpose in their work, or were coming and going in and out of the family, that would be painful. And I think that's kind of what they've experienced. And they're not sure how to deal with it. There's, for certain family issues, you call up a family counselor or go see your pastor, but who does a business owner go to?
Yeah.
So
I think that's great. And I'm glad that you've brought up this idea of the hurt. I probably haven't thought of it that way, but I believe the same thing, that these business owners care deeply about people, but they might not have the tools and strategies to actually meet those people where they need to be met. So maybe you and I can just have a conversation. I mean, I'm seeing business leaders trying to meet this need, maybe to alleviate this hurt in a few ways. One of them is just, hey, let's just keep increasing the compensation and the perks. Are you seeing anything else?
No, and I think that's where that right in the research bears out this disconnect, or maybe my hand should be this way.
Yeah.
I think that might have been a Deloitte chart that you had showed from some research, right? So what I'm talking about, if you're not familiar, if you're watching, is what employers think employees want, and you can see that going on in the marketplace, right? You've got all these signs out there that say now hiring $1,000 bonus to sign on, or healthcare starting day one. There's all these, they're throwing money at the problem. Well, for the most part, the business owners that we have currently, that generation, that was what they valued. I'm not saying money was their idol or anything like that. I'm just saying for the most part, that's when health insurance benefits were born. That's when 401ks and retirement plans were prevalent. That's, those sorts of things that this generation of business owners grew up with that. So in their mind, I think naturally they just gravitate to that, throw money at it, and that's going to solve the problem. As you know, on the other end of the spectrum, what employees, and especially all the research has been done about millennials, 70% of them are saying they get their purpose from their work or their job, or they want 70% of them want that connected, and purpose and money can be two very different things. Yeah. Right. And they want to be valued. That's the number one thing. So that may or may not be money.
Yeah. I think what you've just hit on is generational differences. There was a period of time when people saw work as an opportunity to provide for the other things that I'm doing. So the retirement accounts was for the future, and the savings was for the future. My work day was ending at a certain time so that I could go home and engage in my community and my family and other things. I think the shift that we've seen in people is now people realizing, hey, those promises that were made to the previous generation didn't exactly happen the way we thought. Retirement didn't end up the way we thought. The families are broken. Community structures are broken. People aren't going to church anymore. I've probably over-exaggerated that a little bit. But what people are now saying is we have a generation looking at work and saying, I want more from my workplace. And this is the conversation today, holistic wellness. I want my workplace to actually make me a better person. And when you think about me as a person, there is more to me than just my professional development, my personal development, my leadership development, my financial wellness, my physical wellness, my emotional wellness, my social wellness. You could go all around all these areas. And so now we've got a generation saying, I want more from my workplace. How are business owners and leaders supposed to meet these needs?
Well, and again,
solve the problem, David. Solve it.
Here we go. Again, I think we know the angle I come from, and especially if you're a Christian business owner, if you're a business owner, even if you're not a Christian business owner, but if you really care deeply for your team, this is actually not as difficult as I think we're making it out to be. Not you and I necessarily, but the marketplace. And I think part of the marketplace sees a huge opportunity to generate a whole bunch of money. So there's all these solutions coming up to saying, whatever. But I think what we need to do is we need to be still for a second and just breathe. I think if you come at it from the angle of, I really do care about people, it really is always about people, this is actually going to be easy. And I think I would be, if I was a business owner, I am a business owner. So for me, actually, I get really excited about the opportunity to be able to impact people by employing them, maybe more so ever than the past, than a church might, than a community organization might, than a whatever. I mean, that makes me really excited that the upcoming generation ties these things together. So what I want to do is I want to stop and be still. I want to take a deep breath. And then I think I'm motivated to move forward. There's a really cool story in the Bible, in the book of Matthew. And it's a story about a business owner going out to get workers. And, there's a whole bunch of things about the story that I love, but it sounds remarkably similar to what's going on right now, which is there's a business owner that needs workers. He goes out and there's a whole bunch of people standing around in the morning not working. So he recruits a few of them to come work in his vineyard. And then he goes out like several times during the day and people are still just standing around not working. It's amazing. This was written a couple thousand years ago, and this kind of describes what's going on now. But what's awesome, one of the things that's awesome about this story is he goes out at different times of the day and recruits people, and he promises them all he'll pay them what's fair. He'll pay them a good wage. And at the end of the day, if you don't know the story, the worker has the foreman basically pay everybody the same. So the person that came at 5 p.m. got the same as the person that started at 9 a.m. Well, guess what, right? The workers that started at 9 aren't too pleased. That's a topic for another day. What's the point? Am I advocating we should pay people unfairly? No, but what I am advocating is if we stop and be still and we be encouraged, then I ask the question, what are we doing? What are we going to do going forward that's radically different? Like this business owner was radically different. And that difference bore some tremendous fruit. I won't go into that whole thing, but I love that story for our time right now, which is what are we going to do that's completely different? Right.
Yeah.
I think that's where, and that's maybe going to start with just asking our people.
Mm-hmm. So what is required to do something radically different is what they refer to as adaptability, adaptive behavior, adaptive performance. And obviously so many people and so many businesses have had to adapt over the last year and a half. But from a psychology standpoint, it's a certain type of motivation that allows somebody to adapt. And this is the fascinating part for me. And I promise not to go too deep into science, but when people enjoy their work, feel a purpose in what they do, and see potential for the future, they are more likely to adapt in their performance. If they are simply motivated by emotional pressure, economic pressure, or just the inertia of doing the same thing over and over, that leads to tactical performance. You said, let's just stop and take a breath. When we stop and take a breath, we start to think, hey, some of the things that we've been doing for a long time may not actually be working. To your point earlier, that's the definition of insanity. So let's back up and let's adapt and let's change radically some of the ways that we've been caring for, loving, helping people. And so I'd come back to you.
Yeah.
What are some radical ideas that you have?
Well, again, and I can't take credit for any of these ideas because these are all employee ideas in the last 7 or 8 years of us doing this very thing, which is, stopping, ask the employers, tell the employees, we want to know what's important to you. So they basically hired us to go in and ask those questions to facilitate that assessment. When we've done that, some of the things we've seen all kinds of things, but a good example is, a number of years ago, we had a business where the employees had said that very few of them were giving any time or money, which is pretty common actually. But when we asked them if they wanted to do more, and if so, what was holding them back, the overwhelming majority of employees in this business said they wanted to do more, but time was actually their number one issue. It wasn't money, which really surprised us a little bit and the business owner. And so again, radically different, thinking outside the box, brainstorming. One of the things we did there is the employee offered an incentive for people to receive pay if they wanted to take a day. They did it every quarter. Every quarter, basically, I could take a day to go volunteer and I would still get paid from my job, which sounds kind of funny. You were getting paid to volunteer. So I don't know if it's really volunteering, but that wasn't what was happening, but you get what I'm saying. So that was kind of a radical, random idea. And the employees were blown away when the owner rolled that out. We've seen people where they had a bonus structure in place, and based on the way the employees went through the assessment and us working with them, they would come out and the employee, they would redo the bonus structure so people would be completely debt free, all their employees debt free. They came to work. This happened back in 2014. Everybody came to work in December, one day, a couple weeks before Christmas, and they had the opportunity to leave that day completely debt free. So these are kind of random, things we've seen. But what's consistent across it is where are the employees at? I was talking to a business owner and some managers just last week, and it would have to be a restaurant, and they've had a very difficult period here in Florida. Not enough employees, same thing a lot of people have faced. And this kitchen manager, we actually called him out of the kitchen while I was at the restaurant and asked him, how he was doing everything. And he said he was really struggling this summer, which was our tourist season here. And I asked him what got him through, because he was still working. And he said, honestly, I picked up woodworking. And I think it saved me, because I would just be able to go home and tune out work for a little bit and the customers and everything else. And so we had a little bit of a conversation, and he was emotional about it. After he left, I was talking to the business owner. I said, I wonder how many other employees have a passion outside of work that you could actually sow into, right? So just practical example, like one of the things he was saying, the kitchen manager was saying when we talked to him was, I really have gotten into this, but the tools are really expensive, and the tables I need to kind of go to the next level and all this, it'd be like $500. And, I was thinking in this business, they're paying, $1,500 or so a year for a 401k that hardly anybody's participating in.
Yep.
So to me, like that's the power of knowing, your employees and what they're important to, or what's important to them. So those are just some quick examples, off the top of my head, where when we take a step back, I love what you said, when we marry the heart and the science behind this stuff, the fruit from that and the results are going to be really, really good. And it's going to turn this resignation, whatever we want to label it, it's going to turn it around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where I come from, and obviously as a person of faith too, it's like, okay, what does it mean to love people well? What does it mean to love people well? And as I was listening to you share examples, I was thinking, okay, if I put myself in the shoes of a business owner that I meet with every day, and we said, okay, pay them to go serve, right, or pay them to do woodworking. I had this thought that like a couple business owners would say, okay, great, David. How about you come up with an idea that would keep people engaged in the workplace, that would attract and retain people here? And I obviously I'm playing with you on that, but sure. The one idea that I loved was the whole reducing debt. And at a previous organization where I was leading people, we had a first quarter initiative around financial wellness every year. And one year we did a reducing consumer debt initiative, where we just helped people understand the percentage rates on consumer debt that people are paying and how those are calculated. And then we encouraged people to pay down consumer debt as much as they could over a 90-day period. And then we just had a competition and we tracked it across the organization. The following year, we did an initiative to put more money in 401k. And I think there was a matching program that people weren't taking advantage of, which is what you just said. We're spending money on a 401k program that very few people are actually engaged in. But how do we inform people, educate people on the 401k? And then what we did was we calculated out to retirement at what those funds would look like. And we had to project an interest rate increase and all that. But sure, we were playing this game to say, here's how much money we've put away for retirement in the future. and just another creative way of engaging people in financial wellness, and helping them understand the benefits of it. Any other ideas that you've seen, or any other ways that we can engage people right now?
Yeah, well, I love where you were first going with that. So even in that debt example, so we followed a couple of those employees' stories for a while because we were coaching them, and one of the employees had about $4,000 in student loan debt, and it was keeping him from achieving what he actually wanted to do, which was go into a drama theater school or get some kind of certificate in that area. Because of the employer's intentionality, he was able to realize that goal sooner. Now, he was only with the business about another year and a half, right? So kind of what you were saying at the beginning, like, why would I be doing this stuff where it's actually maybe going to help people leave? Well, it's a longer story, but their loyalty manifests in different ways. And in that case, before he left, he had brought 2 other employees to that business because he was telling all his friends, right? You wouldn't believe what just happened at my work. These guys paid off my student loans for me. Nobody else was doing that. And so, those 2 employees are still there today. It's been about 6 years. So, even though that employee left because they were helped achieve their purpose, right? We have to thinking of it differently. They're still fruit for the business.
Okay, let's put some numbers to that, because I was thinking of this on the fly.
Yeah.
I think you said $5,000 in
about 4,000 in his case.
$4,000 in education debt.
5,000 today. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Inflation. Anyway, you've got this education debt, and somehow through the organization, there's an opportunity to pay down that debt.
Yep.
Now, I know that in the recruiting world today, many businesses are paying upwards of 20+% to a recruiter of a first-year salary to find somebody, or they're spending money on referral bonuses internally to get people. But because you took care of a great employee, this individual went and told all of his or her friends, and some of those people are still retained in the business. And so from a financial sense, what I want to make clear to anybody who's listening is there are creative ways to go about this. However, if you get hurt when somebody leaves your organization, you're probably taking too much of that weight on yourself. And instead, if you loved and valued people well, you would be celebrating the fact that somebody's moving on to what's next, knowing that when they leave, they're going to talk well about your business.
1,000%.
1,000%.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I absolutely love that. How about any other thoughts financially with employees? I mean, I know that this is sort of the realm that you're in. We don't need to talk about the other areas of holistic wellness today, but any other creative ways around financial wellness with our employees today?
Well, I mean, again, I think we've been talking about, like, one of our key internal phrases is going beyond money. So, and that's what we do. I mean, you've got to, especially now, because we've already talked about that, and that's what everyone seems to be throwing money at the problem, and money can be an effective tool if we're healthy with it. But that's another thing we'd like to ask our business owners is, what would it look like to have a workforce, a team that actually was working towards contentment with what they had, and was good at living within their means and had good goals, and then put raises and bonuses on the back end of that. Because we're in this cycle, right? We know the truth is, that almost every income level says if they just had a little bit more, right? The research has been years and years and years. People that make $1 million say, if I just had 1.5, I'd be good. And that's not true. That's just a complete lie. Yeah. So that's one of the things we're talking to some businesses now is, what would it like to sow into a workforce that was actually content with what they had and could handle it well first? And that would be super powerful. I mean, you could imagine the workplace, not to mention all the other, data that's out there that says, which is just logical. if an employee is about to have their car repossessed, or, if they got a flat, they wouldn't be able to get to work for a week, or they can barely make their rent, their productivity and attitude and everything else at work is completely different than the person who has margin, right? So it's just very logical. And that's just a natural place to meet employees, because this is to meet people is at their job, because that's where they're getting money. So,
yeah, I think, gosh, I think you just opened up a whole nother show, because
there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, but I think that might be the most important thing we just stumbled upon, which is, so much of employee wellness with respect to the financial side is about education.
Yeah.
And we live in a society where people are just trying to keep up with whatever. And we're told a lie about debt and about accumulation of stuff and all that. And the reality is, if you talk to somebody who's making $25 million a year, or somebody who's making $45,000 a year, those two individuals could both be living above their means.
Absolutely.
And both be living in debt.
Yep.
And yet the lie that we're fed is you just need to keep making more money and then it'll solve the problem. But the reality is we've got some bad habits. And so part of this is education. I think one of the greatest things we can do as employers is educate people.
Educate, and let me just throw the word empower out there, because we really want the employees to be good stewards of their own stuff. And you can't do that. We don't think, our opinion is, you can't do it just with education. We were built for relationship. So that relationship coaching piece, the accountability part of that, is incredibly powerful. And that's where we're going to see people make progress.
So value people enough to develop relationships with them, to really focus on their holistic wellness. One of those aspects being financial.
Yep.
I think we've heard it best from the money pastor today himself, David Saviola. Thanks for the conversation, David. That was awesome.
You bet.
Any last minute thoughts? And I think what I'll just tell everyone right now is we're going to come back for follow-up conversations on this topic, because there's so many little opportunities we opened up to have a conversation about employee wellness. Gosh, I think we've only begun to uncover this idea of the owner hurt that might be out there. I think we could go deeper on adaptability. And then I think what a lot of people are looking for are these practical answers to how to engage employees. But let me stop talking and give you one last chance to say anything you want to say here.
Well, anybody that's on here or listens in the future, I just want to encourage you. This isn't something you created in your business or your sphere. This is something that's been around for a while. And the good news is you're here and you're living and breathing, which means you can make an impact in a lot of people's lives. So we want to help you do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
David, thanks so much for the conversation.
It's always awesome, Chris.
And with that, that's another episode of the Always About People show. Thanks for joining with us. Again, just want to remind you that you can like and subscribe, and specifically on Facebook, you can get notifications on when the next show is coming up. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for listening to these, whether you're listening live or you're listening later. We hope that these can be an encouragement and helpful and practical for you in your business. We'll see you next time.